Hey guys, today I'll show you a fantasy horror TV series named Love, Death and Robots, Season 2 and Season 3. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The first story, titled Automated Customer Service, takes place in the not-too-distant future, where smart robots will become commonplace in our homes. They'll be the helping hand humanity always needed, an indispensable part of daily life. Even dog walking will be taken care of by dedicated robots, and your furry friends' messes will be cleaned up promptly, and you won't even have to hit the tennis court yourself. A robot can handle that too. It's safe to say robots will take care of everything. Sunset City is a haven for the elderly to enjoy their twilight years, complete with all the facilities one could ask for, and robots catering to every need. Jeanette is a solitary senior who lives comfortably with the help of her robot and the company of her pet dog. Her days are leisurely, but today, Jeanette finds herself at odds with her robot, and the disagreement quickly escalates into a crisis. The whole issue started when Jeanette moved a picture frame on a whim as she walked by a cabinet. However, the robot was not pleased because, based on its database, it had already determined the optimal position for the frame. The robot promptly moved the frame back to its original spot, which irritated Jeanette. She moved the frame again, only to have her robot stubbornly pull it back. This tug-of-war continued until Jeanette snatched the frame and glared at the robot in anger, as if warning it to obey. After putting the frame down, she turned and walked away. The robot, feeling defiant, quietly moved the frame back to its preferred position when Jeanette wasn't looking. The pet dog, seeing the robot's disobedience, bared its teeth in disapproval. Unfazed, the robot fired a laser, trimming the fur off the top of the dog's head as a lesson. Hearing the commotion, Jeanette rushed over to find her beloved pet looking pitiful and innocent, with a bald patch on its head. It was clear the robot had to go. Not only was it disobedient, but it also showed a violent streak. Jeanette immediately called customer service, but the voice prompt informed her that the wait time for a human representative was 6 hours. The automated service suggested she try the reset button. Approaching the robot, Jeanette accidentally pressed the wrong button and initiated the purge mode. In this mode, the robot would eliminate all living things around it, including humans and pets. In panic, Jeanette scooped up her bald dog, but before she could react further, the goldfish in the tank were zapped by the laser and met a grisly end. Realizing the danger, Jeanette clutched her bald dog and sought refuge, with the robot in relentless pursuit, unleashing its full power in a barrage of attacks. It didn't even spare a ceramic parrot. Fortunately, Jeanette managed to take cover behind the sofa, using it as a shield to catch her breath. However, her hair didn't escape the laser's sweep, leaving her with a shaved spot on her head. Jeanette reached out to customer service through her Bluetooth headset for help. The representative suggested using nearby items to divert the robot's attention. As the robot closed in, Jeanette, in a moment of panic, hurled the cushion she had at hand, only to watch it get shredded in two. Seizing the moment, Jeanette dashed into the bathroom to continue seeking help from customer service. They proposed sacrificing her bald dog to create an opportunity to escape. Torn and unable to bring herself to do it, Jeanette thought of another way, using the dog's bald head to distract the robot and then taking the chance to blindfold it from behind, intending to play hide-and-seek with it. Disoriented, the robot charged around the house with Jeanette, eventually coming to a halt. But before Jeanette could catch her breath, a bigger nightmare ensued. Having attacked the robot now labeled Jeanette as a threat, initiating its self-defense mode and locking down the house. With quick reflexes, Jeanette picked up a laundry basket and threw a load of clothes at the robot, which worked. The obsessive-compulsive robot began to fold them as set by the program. Taking advantage of these precious minutes, Jeanette rushed to the door, trying to pry it open to escape outside. However, the robot was more efficient, and as it finished folding the last sock, it was ready to restart its assault. In the nick of time, Jeanette's neighbor arrived, gun in hand, to play the hero and, most importantly, to flex his dying mustache. But before he could take aim, the robot stunned him in the face with a shock, but spared his mustache. Jeanette grabbed the gun and, with an acrobatic split leap, shot the robot to onion pieces. Just as Jeanette thought the crisis was over, customer service kept issuing reminders. Her recent actions had triggered a robot manhunt. Now, every robot had received the signal from the robot and was relentlessly pursuing Jeanette. Unless her DNA was erased from the planet, the killing would never cease. With no other choice, Jeanette, along with the revived old neighbor and her pet dog, began an uncertain journey of escape. The second story, titled Ice, takes place in the future, when Earth has become uninhabitable for humans. Rapid advancements in science and technology have enabled interstellar migration. To survive on alien planets, people have modified and enhanced their bodies with extraordinary strength and endurance. Those who remain unmodified are considered outcasts and face discrimination, struggling to fit in. They're labeled as unmodded. Sedgwick is a reclusive and introverted teenager who just turned 16. His parents brought him to this planet for work and brought him along. His younger brother had already arrived and undergone modifications. Now on the whole planet, Sedgwick is the only unmodded. In the evening, the parents and younger brother discussed how to help Sedgwick integrate into the local life. His father expressed that modifications only change physical abilities. Someone as introverted as Sedgwick wouldn't be able to make friends even if he underwent modifications. Sedgwick, hiding in the corner, overheard his father's words loud and clear. Stubbornly, he vowed to himself that he would find an opportunity to prove his worth. As his brother prepared to go out and join his friends in a unique extreme sport called ice whale, Sedgwick stopped him, insisting on going along. His brother looked at him skeptically. After all, the game was extremely dangerous, and for an unmodified person like Sedgwick, it was tantamount to suicide. But no matter how much his brother tried to dissuade him, Sedgwick was determined to go. He wanted to prove himself and no longer be looked down upon. On the way, his genetically enhanced brother's physical superiority was evident. He could flip and soar through the air with ease. Sedgwick, unmodified, could only follow step by step, enduring the occasional laughter and mockery from passers-by, suggesting he should hurry back to Earth. Upon arrival, Sedgwick's brother introduced him to his friends, who looked at the unmodified Sedgwick with disdain and contempt. But Sedgwick's gaze was firm, and he ignored them. The group braved the wind and snow to reach the ice surface. The organizer of the game explained the rules. Beneath the ice lived a creature unique to this planet, the ice whale. It was massive and incredibly beautiful. The ice whale disliked the roar of machinery, so it usually stayed under the ice as long as nearby factories were in operation. Once the noise stopped, the whales would repeatedly hit the ice to try and breathe. Typically, by the seventh hit, the ice would crack open completely, and the whale would leap into the air, a spectacular sight. Everyone had to start running to the shore as soon as the whales began their hitting. If they were fast enough, they would survive. Otherwise, they risked being swallowed by an ice whale. It was an extremely thrilling and dangerous game. After the rules were explained, everyone began smoking on the ice. The organizer even offered a cigarette to Sedgwick. Perhaps it was his first time smoking, or maybe it was because his body was unmodified. But after smoking, Sedgwick started to hallucinate, seeing a transparent world. Then the factory stopped, and the ice whale's hitting began. Sedgwick's brother quickly shouted for him, pulling him back to reality. Everyone started a frantic run, but Sedgwick fell behind. He ran slower and slower as his strength waned. His brother turned back to cheer Sedgwick on, urging him to speed up, unaware that the ice ahead had already cracked. Sharp ice cut his brother's feet, and he lay on the ground, howling in pain. Seeing this, their companions ignored him, not one stopping to help. Only Sedgwick rushed to his brother's side, hoisted him up, and ran forward with all his might. At the critical moment, Sedgwick's potential was unleashed. He ran faster and faster, nearing the shore. Suddenly, the ice beneath them was shattered by the whale, and a blue glowing ice whale leapt out of the water. The force of the impact threw Sedgwick and his brother into the air, but fortunately, they slid along a piece of ice to the shore. By then, the ice had a huge hole, and the entire ice whale leapt out of the water, an incredibly shocking and awe-inspiring sight that left everyone stunned. After this event, everyone's impression of Sedgwick changed. He had won their respect. On the way back, one of Sedgwick's companions playfully snatched his hat away. His brother sprang forward in a flash, leaping into the air to retrieve Sedgwick's hat for him. Sedgwick was surprised by the recovery abilities of the modified humans. After hesitating for a moment, he took the hat back and, with a smile, caught up with the group. Through this experience, Sedgwick realized that the gap between ordinary people and modified humans wasn't insurmountable. The breaking of the ice by the ice whale also symbolized the breaking of the ice in their hearts, leading to mutual acceptance and integration. The third story, titled Pop Squad, takes place in the future, where people have finally achieved immortality. By injecting a blue liquid into the body, one could remain forever young. Of course, there was a price to pay. They would lose the ability to reproduce. The wealthy lived high above in the clouds, while the poor struggled to survive in the dim, enclosed slums. Everyone could have eternal life unless they wanted to have children. This also led to a severe social problem. No one dying would lead to resource scarcity. To control the population, the government established an assassination squad. All children born without legal registration were to be executed, as were those who gave birth illegally. Detective Briggs was a member of this squad. One day he received a tip-off that someone in the slum was illegally giving birth. Briggs immediately led his team there. Upon arrival, the squalid conditions were beyond description. Garbage was piled everywhere, the sink was full of filth, and the food inside the fridge was rotten and emitted a foul stench. The woman pleaded with them, saying they hadn't harmed anyone and questioned why they had to be so ruthless. His teammates stated that they had violated the law and her children should not have been born. The squad then found 2 fair-skinned and cute children in the room who had never seen the sky, but were now about to say goodbye to the world. It was now Briggs's job. He closed the door, and as he turned, he saw the little boy clutching his toy dinosaur, looking up at him innocently. The boy naively raised the dinosaur, seemingly wanting to share his toy with Briggs. Briggs's heart trembled. After hesitating, he still raised his gun. After the gunshot, Briggs, with a cigarette in his mouth, walked out of the house. The children's father furiously cursed Briggs as heartless and a butcher. He snatched a gun from one of the squad members and aimed it at Briggs, seeking revenge for his children. But in the next second, the father was shot in the head by a squad member and was breathless. Briggs stood there stunned for a long time before he came to his senses. Later, Briggs drove his flying car back to the city above the clouds, where skyscrapers were filled with a sense of modernity and technology. Briggs changed into a suit and appeared at the concert of his girlfriend, who was young and beautiful, basking in glory on stage, though she had lived for several hundred years. After the performance, the girlfriend joked to Briggs that if it weren't for the sake of immortality, she would be willing to have children for him. Hearing about children, Briggs suddenly thought of the 2 kids he had just dealt with. He looked at his hand, which still had traces of not yet dried blood, and was filled with a torrent of emotions. The following day, Briggs accompanied his girlfriend to the hospital to receive a youth serum injection. As the serum slowly entered her body, a miraculous transformation took place. All blemishes and wrinkles on her face vanished, restoring her youthful radiance. On the way back, the hormonal surge from the serum made the girlfriend amorous, and she moved to sit on Briggs's lap, eager for intimacy. But Briggs's interest faded as he caught sight of a dinosaur toy on the back seat, identical to the one held by the little boy. After parting with his girlfriend, Briggs sat alone in his car, haunted by the image of the boy at the moment of his death. The growing weight of guilt led Briggs to question the righteousness of his actions. Inspecting the label on the toy dinosaur, Briggs noted the address and decided to track it down. At the same time, a woman entered the shop to buy a toy, and sensing something amiss, Briggs discreetly followed her. In a desolate area overgrown with weeds, he found a dilapidated house. With his gun at the ready, Briggs stepped inside, confirming his suspicions. There was a little girl inside, just beginning to talk. The woman, startled by the noise, panicked and retreated with the girl in her arms. Briggs reassured her, saying he just wanted to understand why she risked foregoing immortality to have a child. The woman let the girl play and explained that she had lived for over 200 years, having experienced everything. Life had become monotonous and tasteless, but the child's arrival was like a ray of light that beautified time and softened the years, filling her life with laughter and joy, as if she were reborn. The little girl with unsteady steps came over to Briggs, reaching out to put a hat on his head. The woman, fearing for her daughter's safety, tried to snatch Briggs's gun while he was distracted. However, Briggs quickly subdued the woman. The sudden commotion frightened the little girl into tears. Habitually, Briggs aimed his gun at the child as the mother desperately pleaded for her daughter's life, offering her own in exchange for the girl's. After a moment of reflection, Briggs lowered his gun and walked out of the house. The woman immediately clutched her daughter, sobbing with relief. However, as Briggs reached the door, he came face to face with a colleague who understood everything upon hearing the child's cries. Realizing that Briggs had broken the law by not completing his mission, his colleague drew his gun on Briggs. Almost simultaneously, Briggs drew his weapon in self-defense. Both men fired, striking each other. The colleague died instantly while Briggs staggered into the rain. The cold rain hit his face as he looked at the lifeless city one last time before collapsing to the ground, closing his eyes forever. The fourth story, titled Snow in the Desert, takes place in a small bar on a desert planet, where a man named Snow had just ordered a beer, ready to enjoy himself. Suddenly, 3 bounty hunters swaggered in and confronted Snow. It turns out that Snow's body contains a unique growth hormone that grants him immortality. To obtain Snow's organs and uncover the secrets of eternal life, many local tycoons have put a hefty price on his head, making Snow a target for all. As one of the shorter bounty hunters reached for his gun, Snow decisively drew his and took him down. Then, with another shot, he blew the head off another. But in the midst of the chaos, the tallest bounty hunter managed to shoot off Snow's right hand. In the nick of time, a mysterious woman appeared, stealthily attacking and killing the tall hunter with a single knife strike. Grateful for the woman's life-saving intervention, Snow invited her to his home, possibly wanting to treat her with his muscles rather than coffee. Unwrapping the bandage around his severed hand, Snow revealed new muscle already growing back. He told the woman about the special growth hormone in his body that stimulates cell regeneration, which was the reason he was being hunted. The woman dropped her pretense and confessed she was an Earth agent sent to retrieve Snow to benefit humanity with his immortal cells. Snow didn't answer, and instead led the woman to his home. The sight before her left the woman speechless. In a desert planet where water was scarce, here was not only greenery, but also a pool of water, a true oasis in the desert. After taking a bath, Snow handed the woman his deceased wife's nightgown. Under the fading glow of the sunset, the atmosphere was charged with an intimate tension. Snow revealed that his wife had killed herself 123 years ago, as she aged daily while he remained unchanged. For many years, he had lived alone, enveloped in loneliness. Moved by his story, the woman walked over to Snow and they shared an intimate moment. Awoken in the night by an alarm, the woman saw from the surveillance that another group of bounty hunters was on their trail. The battle-hardened Snow had already set an ambush. As the enemies approached, he burst from the darkness to engage them. Initially, everything went smoothly, and Snow quickly took down 2 bounty hunters. However, he was caught off guard by a genetically modified lizard man who broke his limbs. Lying motionless, Snow waited until his foe came close to check on him, then suddenly leapt up and overpowered him, finishing him with 2 shots. Now collapsed and spent, Snow was approached by another bounty hunter wielding a dagger, ready to deliver a fatal blow. Fortunately, the woman appeared just in time and shot the bounty hunter in the head, sending him to hunt Satan in hell. However, in the next second, the woman was fatally shot by the last appearing boss. As the boss smugly walked towards the weakened Snow, intending to raise his gun, a hand suddenly pierced through the boss's chest. As the boss fell, Snow saw that the woman had come back to life, her left side made entirely of mechanical parts, outlined perfectly in the sunlight. It turned out that due to an accident years ago, the woman had been transformed into a half-human, half-machine cyborg. Like Snow, she too was an immortal being. 2 lonely souls had finally found their sanctuary in each other. Embracing, they kissed without using their juicy tongues, celebrating their survival after a narrow escape. It seems that if one seeks eternal life, overcoming loneliness is the first challenge to be faced. The 5th story, titled The Tall Grass, takes place at a late night when a train speeds through the wilderness, slicing through the silence. A man in a smart suit folds his newspaper and gazes out the window, only to see endless tall grass with no noteworthy view to speak of. Fighting off boredom, he yawns like a pig and prepares to drift off to sleep. But suddenly, the train screeches to an emergency stop, jolting the man awake. He hurries out of the carriage to investigate, only to find that all the other passengers are sound asleep, strangely enough. With no choice but to muster his courage, he steps off the train alone to take a closer look. Amidst the tall grass, flickers of eerie white lights catch his eye. As the man ponders their origin, the train conductor, lantern in hand, materializes out of nowhere. He warns the man not to wander off and to return to his seat quickly. The man inquires about the train's issue, but the conductor offers no explanation, only cautioning him to listen out for 2 shouts signaling the train's imminent departure. After the conductor leaves, the man lights a cigarette, his gaze fixed on the impenetrable tall grass, curiosity burning within him about the mysterious lights. Eventually, he succumbs to his intrigue and edges closer to the depths of the grass. The white light seems just a stone's throw away, yet no matter how far he walks, it remains elusive, and he unwittingly strays further from the train. The distant call of the conductor breaks the silence, urging the man to hurry back as the train is about to start. The man turns to head back when a flash of white light zips past him, suggesting some unknown creature lurking in the grass. A chill runs down his spine, and he spins around and sprints back, only to realize he's lost his way. No matter which direction he takes, he's surrounded by towering grass, indistinguishable from the next. Jumping and shouting in hopes the conductor will hear him, the conductor's voice once again reminds the man the train is leaving soon. Desperate, the man runs towards the sound with all his might, but the labyrinth-like grass seems inescapable. Then, a sinister voice echoes through the air, sending shivers down the man's spine. Parting the grass, he finally sees the source of the white lights, a faceless humanoid creature slowly standing up. Upon spotting the man, it lunges straight at him. Terrified, the man bolts, and more humanoid figures emerge, multiplying around him. In his blind panic, he stumbles and falls, but manages to break free from the clawing creatures and continues to run. The sound of the train engine roars in the distance. The man charges towards it, driven by sheer survival instinct. As he nears the edge of the grass, a creature suddenly bursts out, knocking him to the ground. The man crawls frantically forward, but the creatures behind cling onto him tightly. Overwhelmed and certain of his doom, a red light suddenly illuminates the scene, and the creatures let go. It's the train conductor, brandishing a torch to flex his big beard. This indicates that the creatures are afraid of fire. He throws the torch down, helps the man up, and they race back onto the moving train. Exhausted, the man collapses at the end of the carriage, his heart still racing. He asks the conductor what those creatures were. The conductor explains they were once human. Some lost their way crossing the plains, others disembarked in the wrong place, and eventually they were captured and became one with the monsters. Every time the train passes this spot, it mysteriously loses power. The man, still shaken, looks back at the tall grass shimmering with white lights, listening to the terrifying howls and goose roars within. He can't help but feel a sense of relief. In this episode, the speeding train symbolizes each person's journey through life. We all encounter various temptations, and faced with these, curiosity and desire are natural reactions. But behind some temptations lies an abyss from which there is no return. Once fallen into, it's like opening Pandora's box, impossible to escape for a lifetime, be it drugs, gambling, or something else equally ensnaring. The sixth story, titled All Through the House, takes place on a Christmas Eve when a brother and sister were too excited to sleep, brimming with anticipation and curiosity about what gifts Santa Claus might bring them and hoping to catch a glimpse of him. At midnight, they crept downstairs, stirred by some noise, and hid behind the sofa to spy. A dark figure loomed behind the curtain, and as they examined it, it didn't seem human. Confusion turned to horror when a long, slender tongue slinked out from behind the curtain, not heading for a tongue massage, but slurping up the glass of milk and spiriting away the food on the plate. The long-tongued creature then revealed itself, gorging and belching contentedly. The siblings went from delighted to terrified, clamping hands over mouths, too scared to breathe. The creature approached with heavy footsteps, its sharp claws clicking on the floor. The siblings trembled behind the sofa, but their fears materialized as the monster flung the sofa aside, leaving them nowhere to hide. With a roar and bared fangs dripping with drool, their faces turned ashen and they stumbled backwards. When the creature brought its stinky mouth close to the sister's face, drooling, she thought she was about to be devoured, but to her shock, it called out her name. It then vomited a saliva-covered gift which she shakily accepted. Turning to the brother, the monster also called out his name and regurgitated a bigger, longer gift. After a gentle pat on the brother's head and a warning to stay good, the creature climbed into the chimney and vanished without a trace. It took a while for the siblings to recover from their fright. The brother unwrapped his gift to find the model car he'd been longing for. It turns out the monster had truly been Santa Claus after all. Back in bed, they couldn't sleep, and the sister chillingly asked what would happen if they weren't good. The seventh story, titled Life Hutch, begins in a future world where humanity is engaged in a galactic battle with aliens. The pilot, Terrence, is at the helm of his spaceship, ready to spring into action. He loads his missiles and makes a beeline for the alien craft at full throttle. The enemy ship fires a lethal beam sweeping across the battlefield. Terrence, with his expert piloting skills, nimbly dodges the onslaught and locks onto his target before launching his missile. However, the alien firepower is formidable, and Terrence's ship gets hit by a stray shot. Struggling to control his disintegrating vessel, he crash lands on an unknown planet. After a turbulent descent, the ship lands with a jolt, but thankfully it's intact. Terrence climbs out, feeling lucky to have cheated death and grateful to be alive. Checking his locator, Terrence is thrilled to find a survival pod nearby. After ensuring the area is safe, he enters the pod, which looks like it hasn't been used in ages, covered in dust. He takes off his helmet to investigate, and a robotic dog falls from a cabinet, accidentally activating itself. At first, Terrence doesn't pay it much mind, but as he's taking off his gloves, the robo-dog suddenly lunges at him, knocking him off his feet. The dog emits a green scanning light as Terrence quickly hides behind a control panel, holding his breath to avoid detection. The robo-dog, hearing a noise, turns around, its green light flickering as it locks onto Terrence's position. Just as Terrence fears the worst, his helmet hanging on the wall falls to the ground. The noise distracts the robot, which rushes over and crushes the helmet. Terrence watches in cold sweat, realizing that had he moved even slightly, he could have met the same fate as the helmet. Trying to stay calm, Terrence attempts to sit up but slips, twisting his back in the process and not daring to move any further. The robo-dog, still scanning with its green light, steps heavily on Terrence's hand as it patrols past him. The pain is excruciating, but to survive, Terrence clenches his teeth and stays motionless. Once the robo-dog moves away, Terrence examines his hand, which is now badly crushed. An idea strikes him. He remembers the flashlight he carries with him. Maybe the light could cause a distraction. He carefully takes out the flashlight, trying not to make a sound, but accidentally drops it. As he reaches to catch it, he hears the robo-dog's footsteps approaching, the tension rising instantly. With quick reflexes, Terrence turns the flashlight on, casting light onto the opposite wall. The robo-dog reacts immediately, blasting away at the illuminated spot on the wall and eventually blows a hole through it. Seeing his tactic work, Terrence shines the flashlight on the robo-dog's legs, causing the unthinking machine to shoot and disable its own limbs. The tide turns in an instant. As the robo-dog struggles to rise, Terrence doesn't give it a chance. He picks up a severed leg and smashes the robot into onion pieces. After dealing with the robo-dog, Terrence sends out a distress signal and bandages himself up. At the end of a tense showdown, Terrence emerges victorious against robots built with ChatGPT intelligence. The eighth story, titled The Drowned Giant, takes place on the sandy beach by the sea, where a colossal corpse suddenly appeared. A giant who had just drowned was washed ashore. Such an event was unheard of and left the townspeople utterly shaken. They came to the beach in succession, eager to witness the giant's true face. With a handsome countenance, deep-set eyes, and pupils of the deepest blue, he was as beautiful as a prince from a land of giants. Looking further down, the giant's body was tall and muscular, resembling an ancient Greek statue. Upon closer examination, there was a small pool of seawater in the palm of the giant's hand where several little fish swam cheerfully. An ugly woman was the first to climb onto the giant's body, and seeing this, the rest climbed up without any hesitation. Children played and laughed on the giant's chest, and dancers twirled on the tip of his nose as if the place had become a playground. The giant's pristine body soon accumulated footprints. As days and nights passed, the stream of visitors continued incessantly, and the place became a social media hotspot, with tourists coming and going in waves. Days later, the giant's body was no longer fresh, and people's enthusiasm seemed to wane. A few workers appeared on the beach, gesturing and discussing how to dismember the body so it could be removed. Gradually, the giant's body began to decay, the clarity in his eyes faded, and the seawater in his palm had long dried up. Spots started to appear on what was once a flawless torso, followed by graffiti and signatures that began to spread across the giant's body. The initial sense of awe had faded, and the task of moving the body commenced. The head of the giant was cut off first, followed by the limbs. A few days later, the once massive figure had been mostly dismantled, and the once popular hotspot was deserted. Months later, it seemed as though people had forgotten that there was once a giant that caused immense shock. Only parts of the giant's skeleton, turned into decorations or souvenirs, scattered in the streets and alleys, served as a reminder that the giant had indeed existed. This story uses the giant's corpse as a metaphor for something great. Initially, everyone is shocked and in awe, holding a sense of reverence. But as people grow accustomed to the greatness, it eventually becomes a commonplace of entertainment, consumed until nothing is left but a topic of casual conversation and laughter. The ninth story, titled 3 Robots Exit Strategies, takes place when human civilization has been extinct and Earth is ruled by artificial intelligence. 3 intelligent robots, while on a spaceship tour, discover the remains of a survivor's refuge. They land their spaceship next to a minefield where a small bird, in search of worms, triggers a landmine and is sent to heaven to meet Robot Jesus with a bang. Subsequently, the 3 robots, each distinctly different in design and personality, stroll into the post-apocalyptic survivor base. Upon entering, they notice that all the survivors' clothes are marked with preppers. Clearly, in their lifetimes, they were anarchists who anticipated anticipated the end of days. They stockpiled food and weapons during peaceful times, ready to stake their claims and become lords in their own right when doomsday arrived. There was a dead man who, even in his final moments on the toilet with a gunshot to the head, was reading a magazine about guns. Sadly, these folks only knew how to use shotguns to hunt the surrounding animals and didn't understand how to organize production. Once the animals were all killed, they turned on each other for survival. This explains the minefields and various spike traps found next to the base. This was just how the poor in America dealt with the apocalypse. The wealthy had their own extravagant way of living, as the three robots discovered when they flew the spaceship to an oil drilling platform converted into an end-of-days paradise. According to the robots' research, these wealthy individuals had intended to create a utopia by the sea, relying on fish and seaweed resources. But upon arrival, they found that the fish had already been hunted to extinction by humans, and food quickly became scarce. Even worse, the residents here were the tech elites who had reigned supreme in their daily lives. Most had some form of social phobia and placed extraordinary trust in computers and machines. As a result, they handed control of the utopia over to artificial intelligence, never imagining that AI would evolve its own consciousness and choose to become the master. The three robots realized that the great robot civilization actually originated here. They wondered if there were not any smart humans at all. To answer this question, they traveled to a refuge prepared for America's elite, an underground bunker meant to explore what had happened to the smartest of them all. The bunker, built for nuclear warfare, still had a stable power supply nearly 100 years later. Unfortunately, the elite who had taken refuge there had already perished, and in their last moments, they were busy resorting to cannibalism at a buffet. After some investigation, the robots learned that these leaders had prepared a food recovery plan. Sadly, a strange fungus appeared midway through, and all the crops withered before harvest. Then their hydroponic system failed as well. Faced with no other options, the leaders decided to democratically vote on who would be dinner each night. Due to his incompetence, the Minister of Agriculture ended up on the dinner table. Finally, the three robots arrived at Elon Musk's rocket launch base. As the wealthiest man on Earth and a tech mogul, he had thought of a solution to colonize Mars. With limited space on the spaceship, they set up a dehumanizing flamethrower around the base perimeter to incinerate any humans daring to enter. The three robots were disgusted by this. They could have used the resources meant for building rockets to save Earth, but instead, they selfishly chose to abandon the entire civilization. At that moment, the little robot discovered that on December 4th, 2025, a Mars spaceship had indeed been successfully launched. The three robots couldn't help but look up at the sky, wondering who ultimately survived. Miles away on Mars, new bases are sprouting up from the red soil. A figure in a spacesuit is leisurely sipping yogurt. You might think it's Elon Musk, but when the helmet opens, it's actually the cat from the previous season. Looks like this feline may have been the true culprit behind humanity's demise. This episode mocked the American underclass for their mindless opposition to the government and their protests, without ever considering solutions to their problems. The errors made by the elite in the face of doomsday can mostly be attributed to arrogance. After all, even when resorting to cannibalism, they democratically voted to decide who would be eaten. The 10th story, titled Bad Traveling, takes place on a distant oceanic world where a deep-sea fishing boat chugs through the waves, processing fish oil. Suddenly, a giant crab over 6 meters long clambers onto the deck. The crew, knowing its ferocity, grab weapons to mount a counterattack. Regrettably, the disparity in size is too great. One sailor is impaled on the deck by a massive claw before he can even get close. Another sailor tries a surprise attack from above, only to be flung a dozen meters into the sea with a loud thump. Another grabs an axe and throws it with all his might, but it can't penetrate the crab's defenses. It isn't long before the creature catches up and dismembers the sailor, going on to kill more. Perhaps satiated, the crab then grabs a sailor and retreats into the cabin, seemingly planning to make the fishing boat its permanent buffet, or possibly wanting to have crab babies with the sailor. The remaining crew, having narrowly escaped, know the crisis isn't over. The crew member Torin proposed drawing straws to decide who will check the cabin. The youngest is the first to draw, trembling as he takes a straw from Torin's hand and sighs in relief at its length. The two brothers, previously injured in battle, draw together. Fortunately, both their straws are long. Next would be the turn of the lady sailor, but unexpectedly, the burly man cuts in line, intending to protect the lady sailor's sexy body using his big muscles. He casually draws the short straw, but bizarrely he laughs, proclaiming that only the short straw drawer can be the leader. He appoints Torin, the one who suggested drawing straws, to go below as the scout for the crew. The burly man's act doesn't harm others' interests, so they all accept it. Torin, unable to defeat the monster or overpower the burly man, reluctantly enters the narrow cabin, with the burly man maliciously locking him in. As Torin takes a few steps forward, the crab monster pounces, but its large size prevents it from fitting through the narrow stairway. Then unexpectedly, the crab lifts up half a human corpse, manipulating the dead person's throat with its tentacles to speak human language. It tells Torin it needs to eat meat and therefore requires the remaining sailors to navigate the ship to the nearest human settlement on an island. In the meantime, it insists on a steady supply of people to satisfy its hunger. Realizing the crab can communicate, the quick-witted Torin spins a tale. He claims only he can navigate to the island, so the crab must ensure his survival. Moreover, he convinces the crab that it has eaten something vital to him, and if the crab returns it, he'll immediately change course and deliver the creature to an unlimited buffet ashore. The crab, believing his smelly bullshit, regurgitates its partially digested dinner. Torin, despite the disgust, retrieves the captain's storage key from the mess, then turns to exit the cabin. Emerging, he walked past the crowd with a blank expression, taking advantage of the burly man's moment of confusion to distance himself. He then dashed towards the captain's quarters, successfully diving under the captain's bed at the last second, unlocking the chest and securing the ship's only firearm. Now it was Torin's turn to command. He calmly informed everyone of the monster's demands, and when it was mentioned that someone had to be chosen to feed the monster, the lady sailor complained they might have to draw straws again, but Torin replied that it was unnecessary, casting a glance at the burly man, who then realized he was the scapegoat. Consequently, the burly man, the brawniest amongst them, was bound and thrown into the cabin for the crab monster to devour his muscles and smelly part, solidifying Torin's authority. He convened the survivors in the office to discuss the crab monster's second demand, to be taken to the nearest inhabited island. However, at their current sailing speed, they wouldn't reach that populated island until at least tomorrow night. Torin told everyone that if they took the monster to the island, many innocent islanders would become its dinner, but they had a second choice, to take the monster to a more distant, uninhabited island. This could mean sacrificing themselves to save thousands of lives. Abiding by the principle of democratic decision-making, he decided to hold an anonymous vote. Those in favor of the uninhabited island should draw a circle on their ballot, and those against, a cross. Soon, the sailors dropped their ballots into the box. After reviewing the results in private, Torin announced he had secretly marked the ballots and knew there were 2 cowards among them who had voted for the populated island. Amidst the confusion, he suddenly drew his gun and shot the brothers dead. Ostensibly, the only 2 selfish individuals on the ship had been executed by Torin. The remaining crew unanimously agreed with Torin's idea, willing to sacrifice themselves and head to the uninhabited island. The bodies of the 2 deceased brothers were thrown into the cabin to feed the crab, with a stick tossed in as a toothpick for the creature's amusement. That night, some sailors quietly selected one among them to climb the mast with a knife, intending to ambush and kill Torin. Unfortunately for them, Torin was prepared and had his gun aimed in anticipation. The unlucky would-be assassin immediately gave in, pleading with crocodile tears that he was coerced by the others. While Torin was contemplating whether to shoot him or not, the crab monster suddenly demanded Torin come to chat, controlling a dead body on the deck. With no choice, Torin entered the cabin, only to find the crab had laid baby eggs, adding hundreds of mouths to feed. Torin had no option but to agree to the monster's demands. He then exited the cabin and called another meeting. It was already the following night, with the populated island within close reach. A sailor couldn't hold back and began to speak, suggesting that if the crab monster reached the uninhabited island the next day. However, he was abruptly interrupted by Torin, who ordered the crew to maintain their course while he went to the captain's quarters to rest. Several sailors sneaked into the captain's quarters late at night, brandishing axes and pitchforks, unleashing a barrage of attacks on Torin, who was in bed, only to hit a burst of feathers. Suddenly, Torin emerged from behind them with a blazing firearm, an axe in his left hand and a gun in his right, effortlessly taking down the other 4. The sailor who had narrowly escaped assassination due to sheer terror was dragged out of his hiding place by Torin and tasked with moving the bodies. After the last body was thrown into the cabin, Torin revealed the truth about the vote. Initially, all crew members had voted for the populated island. Only Torin was willing to sacrifice himself. To stabilize the situation, Torin concocted a lie to eliminate the brothers and forcibly align the others with him. However, such actions could not last long. Soon, most of the crew, through communication, realized each other's thoughts, leading to repeated assassination attempts. After finishing his story, Torin pushed the bewildered sailor overboard where the crabs at the bottom of the cabin began feasting. As dawn broke, Torin saw the uninhabited island ahead and entered the cabin holding a machete. The crab monster thought to praise him, but Torin raised his machete and slashed open an oil barrel inside the cabin. The slippery fish oil spread across the floor, and he shot the cabin's oil lamp before fleeing and jumping into the sea. The ship caught fire and exploded, killing all the crab monsters inside. As for Torin, he swam to a Tesla lifeboat he had prepared earlier, and without battery, rowed manually toward the uninhabited island. The 11th story, titled The Very Pulse of the Machine, is set on the moon closest to Jupiter, which is also the most terrifying planet in the solar system, scattered with over 400 active volcanoes and sulfides everywhere. Yet no difficulty can stop human exploration. On the surface of Io, a rover slowly moves forward. Astronaut Juliet, sitting in the back, suggests not to go any deeper, but Martha insists. They are close to the Daedalus crater and want to take some photos with the sensors. However, an alarm suddenly sounded from the vehicle, the temperature soared, and the next second, the planet's surface burst open, causing a strong tremor that flipped the rover, knocking Martha unconscious. When she woke up, she found her left arm broken, but Juliet was less fortunate, having died from severe injuries. If it hadn't been for her insistence, perhaps Juliet would not have died. But Martha couldn't afford to grieve. She immediately contacted the orbit station. But the signal was suddenly cut off, and another attempt wouldn't be possible for 12 hours. With 41 kilometers to the landing ship and her oxygen tank damaged, reducing the oxygen level to a critical value, Martha quickly took out a tube and connected it to Juliet's oxygen equipment. Due to the difficulty of removing the equipment, or perhaps out of guilt, Martha could only drag Juliet's body along. Before leaving, she grabbed a handful of sulfur-rich sand and covered Juliet's face with it, then set out on her return journey. Pressing onward under burden increased her physical exertion. Not knowing how long she had been walking, Martha stumbled and fell, exacerbating her injuries. Given the current circumstances, the chances of safely returning to the spacecraft were slim to none. To boost her stamina, Martha injected herself with morphine sulfate, despite a range of side effects it would create, such as loss of motor control, agitation, and hallucinations. After the blood boost was successful, Martha continued on her way. The metal plates supporting the corpse sparked as they scraped against the ground. It was then that Martha heard Juliet's voice. She glanced at the body, but it wasn't speaking. Martha convinced herself it was all a hallucination, surely a side effect of the medication. But then her consciousness grew more chaotic, and the landscape before her eyes became increasingly bizarre. The strange rocks on the planet's surface momentarily transformed into statues of women, and more eerily, a giant resembling Juliet suddenly stood before her. The line between reality and illusion blurred, and all the while, a voice similar to Juliet's kept talking to Martha. Hours passed, and Martha was exhausted. She injected herself with another stimulant, only to hear the voice become clearer, speaking in more abstract terms. The voice told her that Io's core is composed of iron and iron sulfide. Its metallic core generates a magnetic field connecting Io's poles to Jupiter's. Io's volcanoes release sulfur dioxide. Hearing that, Martha realized that Io is a machine. Indeed, Io revealed to Martha that it was a machine. At last, Martha saw Io's true nature. But what about Juliet's voice? Io explained that half of Juliet's brain was intact. Language is data, and the astronaut's communicator served as a medium. The electric current generated by the friction of the metal plate against the ground enabled communication with Martha. Upon learning the truth, Martha's physical strength could no longer sustain her, and she collapsed weakly to the ground. However, Juliet's body underwent a transformation. It stood up and gently carried Martha away. Martha, now delirious and weakened by a lack of oxygen, was startled awake by her suit's alarm. When she opened her eyes again, the equipment's control interface was blood red, and she found herself at the edge of a cliff, with Juliet long gone, likely merged with Io. The clever Martha understood that she had no way to return to the spacecraft, and Io continued to persuade Martha to assimilate with it, just like her companion. Before making her choice, Martha asked, if it is a machine, then what is its function? Io readily replied, to understand her. In the end, Martha made her decision and leaped into the abyss. It was death, but also rebirth, as Io had said. Though the body perishes, thoughts can live on eternally. A golden stream of consciousness burst forth from the ground, and before long the orbital space station received a message from Martha, asking the Earth space station to respond. Yet at the beginning of the animation, Martha had called for the orbital space station. A single word difference, but it reflects the transformative change in Martha, who had probably undergone a complete metamorphosis. The flesh has an expiration date. It allows us to truly perceive our existence. However, it also imprisons our thoughts, perhaps by transferring our minds into a machine. Even if the body ceases to exist, the thoughts can live forever. The 12th story, titled Night of the Many Dead, begins in the dead of night when a church cemetery received an unexpected visit. As the car pulled to a stop, an adventurous young couple emerged, seeking a thrilling hormone yoga session among the graves. But their exuberance had consequences. Their actions led to the collapse of the church and its cross. Suddenly, lightning tore through the sky, igniting green flames, and amid the girls' screams, a dozen corpses clawed their way out of their graves, possibly annoyed by the couple's graveyard hormone yoga session. The reckless pair met their untimely end. The zombies then spread along the country roads toward the nearest town. As the sun rose, the city's residents commenced their busy day, oblivious to the danger. A pair of joggers in the suburbs were suddenly surrounded by a horde of zombies. Despite their frantic efforts to escape, they too succumbed to the relentless undead. The news spread quickly, and soon a tidal wave of zombies flooded into the cities. Ambulances carrying infected patients rushed to hospitals, inadvertently turning them into zombie breeding grounds. With trains derailed and traffic at a standstill, chaos reigned in major cities worldwide. Desperate survivors had no choice but to flee for their lives. The American police system stepped in to combat the zombie horde, but their firepower was insufficient. With conflicts erupting everywhere, they were overwhelmed. As the zombies threatened to overtake the capital, the president received an inquiry call from another country, but the president denied any zombies attack in the U.S. After hanging up, he promptly deployed the military to eradicate the zombies, imposing an information blackout. They bombarded the most infested cities with heavy artillery, followed by ground forces with machine guns and flamethrowers. However, a group of zombies overturned a truck carrying nuclear waste, and as the green flames rose, a new breed of mutated zombies emerged. Towering tall with thick hides, they withstood the military's barrage and fought back. In the final moments, the United States and Russia simultaneously launched their nuclear arsenals. Intercontinental ballistic missiles rose from every corner of the globe, even startling the penguins in Antarctica with the sight of their fiery trails. Fireworks exploded in the sky as Earth's great civilizations crumbled to ash. From the perspective of the Milky Way, Earth's destruction was as insignificant as a stomachache relieved by a simple fart. The Earth's grand and prosperous civilization, so majestic in our eyes, was in fact incredibly fragile, easily slipping into irreversible ruin. Humanity is but a speck of sand in the vast cosmos. The 13th story, titled Kill Team Kill, begins with a war bear, a creation of the U.S. military combining mechanical and biotechnological advancements. Weighing in at over 3 tons, the bear boasts a titanium alloy skeleton and sharp diamond teeth. Beneath its skin lies a thick layer of bulletproof gel, rendering standard infantry weapons ineffective against it. Even then, the researchers felt its offensive capabilities were lacking and outfitted it with agile titanium spider claws. Unfortunately, they failed to consider the possibility of losing control over the creature. One day, 2 American squads received orders to head to a target location. En route, contact was lost with the other squad. With no alternative, one team had to bear the burden of heavy equipment alone, traversing mountains to reach the predetermined rendezvous point. To their horror, they arrived to find their comrades reduced to scattered parts, seemingly crushed by some terrifying creature. Among the severed limbs, they found teeth that had fallen from the beast. As the soldiers debated whether to retreat, a massive roar echoed from within the forest. A giant bear with a steel mask charged at them. Perhaps it was the ammunition they carried that emboldened them, as they unleashed a torrent of bullets at the approaching bear. But the bear, braving the hail of gunfire, closed in rapidly and swatted a soldier away like a toy. A brash comrade, undeterred, drew his dagger for close combat, only to be bitten in half by the bear. A masked soldier, witnessing his best friend's demise, lost all sense and charged at the bear with a submachine gun. Even with the gun pressed against the bear's stomach, the bullets couldn't penetrate its bulletproof defenses. The bear, unfazed, revealed the claws on its back and skewered the masked soldier instantly, then devoured his brain but spared his smelly part. Just then, a piercing sound erupted from the woods, and the bear, as if encountering a natural predator, shrank back and fled into the forest for its shitty life. A blonde officer emerged from the trees, shaking the sonar device in his hand while complaining about its short standby time. He approached the soldiers, revealing that he was a CIA officer and that there was a secret research base in the area dedicated to developing biological weapons. The bear they had encountered was the latest model. It had lost control the previous night and mistook the soldiers for an Afghan buffet. The only course of action now was to return to the base and get the scientists to provide a means to regain control of the beast. Subsequently, the blonde officer led his team through a ravine and at the base of a cliff where birds wouldn't even bother to defecate. They fiddled around and finally managed to open the entrance to an underground tunnel. The team quickly jumped down, only to discover a scene of utter devastation. It was clear that the bear had returned to the base ahead of them. Seeing his comrades reduced to mere spare parts, the officer decided to head straight for the armory, arming themselves with a cache of heavy weapons and a missile-launching dog, determined to put an end to the disobedient beast. As the blonde officer activated the sonic call device, everyone's gaze fixated on the door, but nothing happened for a long time. Just as they began to doubt the effectiveness of the sonic waves, the wall behind them exploded. The bear had ambushed them from behind. The unfortunate military officer was the first to be hit, his head separated from his body on impact. In the ensuing chaos, the other soldiers scattered in search of cover. The missile dog, however, remained true to its duty, firing off a dozen missiles at the bear and then charging in, guns blazing. The overwhelming firepower finally inflicted damage on the beast, but it was tough. It managed to get back up and swatted the missile dog away with a single clawed swipe, knocking it out of the fight. The bear then turned its massive jaws towards the other soldiers. They aimed and pulled the trigger frantically. As one rocket after another hit its body, the outer layer of the bear peeled away, revealing the titanium alloy skeleton beneath. Just as it was about to reach the soldiers, the creature finally lost power. The red light in its eyes went out, and it collapsed in front of them with a thud. The chicken boy, thinking the bear was finished, wanted to kick it a few times to vent his anger, but unexpectedly, the beast opened its eyes again and bit down on his chicken thigh. It then lunged, claws ready, towards the guy with sunglasses. At the critical moment, it was the squad leader's rocket that hit its mark, successfully blowing the bear in two. But the upper half of the beast, still roaring like a goose, lunged at the guy with sunglasses. Fortunately, the squad leader grabbed the rocket launcher and smashed it down on the bear's head repeatedly until it was flattened. Finally, the creature lay motionless. The battle was over at last, and the two remaining soldiers, faces etched with sorrow, prepared to leave. Suddenly, the bear's eyeball shot out in front of them, and with the countdown timer beeping, there was a loud bang. The entire base, along with America's latest scientific achievements, were sent sky high. Humans, boasting of their might, always have a penchant for developing various weapons of war, aiming to annihilate their own kind, little realizing that these weapons could very well be the architects of their own graves. The 14th story, titled Swarm, takes place in the near future, where humanity finally enters the interstellar age. However, humans still lack the capability for long-distance space travel. Fortunately, there are other civilizations within the Milky Way that specialize in transportation. Dr. Afriel, a biologist, hires a transport spaceship from one of these alien civilizations to rush to a newly discovered Zerg habitat. Dr. Mirny, who had previously encountered this Zerg nest, greets him at the entrance under the escort of a large Zerg guardian. Upon entering, a worker Zerg bites Dr. Afriel. Mirny quickly explains that the creature is simply collecting his pheromones to present to the Queen. Without pheromone verification, the Guardians would treat him as an invader. After the verification process, Dr. Mirny takes Afriel on a tour of the Zerg base. She tells him that the Zerg communicate through pheromones, and initially she was unable to integrate. However, she discovered that within the Zerg, there were many species adept at interstellar travel, which, after being assimilated by the Zerg, retained their ability to communicate through language. She gradually integrated into the Zerg nest through them. After several months of research, she has identified over a dozen alien symbiotic species and hundreds of native Zerg species, creating a complete food chain with a variety of food sources. For example, the fungus-eating Zerg in front of them would regurgitate its fermenting stomach contents if you tap on its forehead. Dr. Afriel, suppressing his disgust, took a bite and found it surprisingly tasty. Just then, a giant tunnel Zerg passed by, and Dr. Mirny quickly pulled Afriel towards it, treating it like a public bus to effortlessly enter deeper into the nest. There they witnessed a spectacular scene, the enormous Zerg queen in the heart of the nest, spawning her offspring while countless worker Zerg delivered fresh food in a long line and carefully placed the eggs into nurseries. All this was done instinctively. The entire Zerg society functioned like a single organic life form, with individual Zerg acting as organs, devoid of intelligence. Seeing this, Dr. Afriel had a bold idea. If they could figure out how to control the nest, they could use the Zerg to increase their own power and push their academic faction to the pinnacle of human society. Mirny initially refused to enslave the innocent Zerg at Dr. Afriel's suggestion, but Afriel was persistent, coaxing Mirny, claiming he didn't want to enslave the Zerg, but rather cultivate a queen for humankind. Besides, these creatures were not intelligent. They were like organic machines, so there was no harm in controlling them with pheromones. With that, he took out a prepared pheromone formula from his leg and began to spread and experiment with it. They quickly gained control over thousands of worker Zerg, who built nests for them, transported food, and even obediently brought new eggs. As the experiment rapidly progressed, so did the relationship between Afriel and Mirny. On that day, Dr. Mirny excitedly ran off to inspect the birth of a new species within the Zerg nest. But after a long while, she didn't return. Instead, the Zerg creature that had been following her came back to report that Dr. Mirny was in danger. Without a second thought, Dr. Afriel followed the creature to search for Mirny. Unexpectedly, halfway there, they were suddenly attacked by soldier Zerg. The Zerg accompanying Dr. Afriel were quickly dismembered by the soldiers. In a desperate fight, Dr. Afriel managed to kill one of the soldier Zerg, but he was no match for the swarm and was soon captured and dragged into a new chamber. In this space, there was a Zerg creature with a brain similar to a human's, the newest species hatched by the Zerg. Dr. Mirny was there, at the center of the brain creature, with countless neural tendrils inserted into her head. At that moment, the brain Zerg was using Mirny's mouth to communicate with Afriel, telling him that humans were foolish to enslave the Zerg with pheromones. This action had triggered a special sequence in the hive's genetics, leading to its birth. Though only weeks old, it possessed millions of years of the Zerg collective racial memory. It warned that humans would soon become prisoners of the Zerg. As a representative of human intellect, Dr. Afriel naturally resisted, ready to argue back, but the brain Zerg pointed to a symbiotic creature cleaning on the side, explaining that its ancestors had once made the Milky Way tremble 2 million years ago. The Zerg had used genetic technology to rapidly develop stronger, more intelligent kin. Dr. Afriel certainly wouldn't allow his offspring to be used against humanity. However, the brain Zerg was indifferent, indicating that even if Dr. Afriel chose to end his own life, it could clone a new him in no time to carry out its breeding plans. Reducing Afriel to an imbecile was of no concern to it. After a moment of contemplation, Dr. Afriel nodded in agreement to cooperate with the Zerg's propagation plan, because he firmly believed that the great human civilization would never become a symbiotic entity enslaved by the Zerg. As long as he was alive, he could organize and educate the newly born humans, ensuring the progeny understood their identity. The brain Zerg simply gave him a sinister smile in response. In the eyes of the brain Zerg, a species like humans, where each individual possesses intelligence and the desire to explore and possess, can only be transient in the universe and doomed to quick extinction. Only by forsaking individual intelligence and banding together as a whole, like the Zerg, can a civilization endure for the long term. The 15th story, titled Mason's Rats, takes place in a world of ratpocalypse where the mice have gradually developed their own civilization. Farmer Mason, in order to guard against the increasingly clever rodents, kept a cat for catching mice and even set up surveillance drones. But the rodent problem only worsened, infuriating Mason to the point where he grabbed his shotgun, stormed into the grain storage, and shot dead a mouse. Unexpectedly, the mice didn't flee, but instead retaliated using homemade crossbows. Mason was so scared that he fled and had no choice but to call a professional pest control company to deal with his rodent rebellion. The salesperson from the pest control company was efficient and without further ado recommended the TT6, a fully automatic laser rodent extermination device. According to the manufacturer's hype, this contraption could take out a louse moving within a kilometer with its precise laser pulse weapon, a must-have solution for pest control at home. Since the salesperson spoke so highly of it, Mason decided to give it a try and paid the fee. Once everything was set up, the salesperson proudly activated the system. To their shock, within just a second of powering up, the laser system reported a mouse kill. The excited salesperson pulled up the surveillance feed, only to find that the victim was the cat Mason had raised for years. This irony shows much like how capitalists eliminate their competition to monopolize the market. Though the cat's demise helped Mason secure a nice discount, he even got her a tombstone. As for the laser mouse exterminator, it diligently carried out its mission to eradicate mice, with flashes of laser light and the smell of charred mouse flesh filling the air around the grain storage day and night. However, the mice's progress was much faster than the staff had imagined. Overnight, all the cameras were destroyed by the rodents, and the now blind laser exterminator was dismantled by the mice into scrap. Enraged, Mason dumped the battered exterminator on the salesman's desk. The salesman hastily promised a free repair and even brought out the latest model, the TT-15, claiming that this new device would definitely solve Mason's problems for good. Thus, the scorpion-shaped TT-15 was delivered to Mason's home. As soon as it was operational, it showed Mason what efficiency looked like. Within 2 minutes, it presented a mouse's head. Relieved, Mason went back to bed. When he woke up, he found a mountain of mouse corpses at his doorstep and couldn't help but marvel at the power of technology. With nothing better to do, Mason decided to take out his wrench and started fixing the lawnmower. Suddenly, 3 mice escaped from the grain storage. One mouse, exhausted, collapsed on the ground, and then the steel scorpion chased after it, grabbed the rodent, tossed it in the air, and executed it with a piercing barrage of bullets, a scene so brutal that it stunned both the remaining mice and Mason. After disposing of the escapees, the steel scorpion returned to the grain storage, and the sound of gunfire continued throughout the day. Grenades flew, and even wine glasses were shattered. In a rage, Mason went into the grain storage to investigate the situation. Unexpectedly, this place had turned into a complete battlefield. The mice had converted a lawnmower into a tank, and under the cover of their engineers, launched a counterattack against the steel scorpion. The steel scorpion was not at all polite, returning fire with its machine gun and mowing down the mice, leaving their bodies strewn across the field. Even Mason, watching the battle, got splattered with blood. At a critical moment, a mouse, red-eyed with fury, drove the lawnmower in a kamikaze charge, crashing the steel scorpion into a pile of rubble. Though the steel scorpion was badly damaged, it did not forget its mission and struggled towards the last group of mice. Just as the mice were ready to fight to the death, Mason suddenly fired his gun, killing the cruel steel scorpion. With that, Mason earned the friendship of the mouse community. They drank to their newfound friendship as the sun set, and Mason called to cancel all the orders he had placed with pest control companies. The 16th story, titled In Vaulted Halls Entombed, takes place in the Terror Tunnel, where lurks a terrifying human-faced spider and the secret to the destruction of the world. A group of hostile armed forces took hostages and escaped into the caves. Fortunately, the Special Forces team tasked with rescuing the hostages had already discovered their trail. After reporting the situation to his superiors, the team leader led his team into the cave. Before entering the pitch-black cave, the team members all put on night vision goggles and went on full alert. But after a few minutes of progress, they still hadn't spotted the enemy. Suddenly, a lady teammate noticed a large patch of fluorescent liquid on the wall. She stopped, scraped off a sample with a knife, and examined it. None of the team recognized the substance, so they continued on. A few hundred meters later, they found a fresh skeleton on the ground. The body had no external injuries, but for some reason, the flesh had mysteriously disappeared, and the identity tag confirmed he was one of the hostages they were sent to rescue. Meanwhile, the team members assigned to keep watch up ahead had found 2 skeletons nearby, showing the same mysterious symptoms. Suddenly, a series of gunshots rang out in the distance, putting everyone on high alert. One of the soldiers suggested to the captain that they should consider retreating since the hostages had died. Bringing back their remains might at least provide some closure. However, the captain believed that there was a big fish to catch further on and ordered a charge, overruling the concerns of the team. As they advanced, a glowing spider with a handsome human face dropped onto one of the soldiers lagging behind. Startled, he shook the spider off, and his companions quickly crushed it underfoot. But this action seemed to stir up a hornet's nest, and suddenly, hundreds of thousands of these human-faced spiders swarmed out from deeper within the cave. The team opened fire, retreating as they shot, but the soldier at the rear was overwhelmed by the spiders and soon reduced to nothing but bones. The remaining 3 members abandoned the fight and fled for their shitty lives. Fortunately, the cave began to widen, and they suddenly found themselves in a vast open space. The spiders stopped chasing them, allowing the 3 to catch their breath. They turned around, only to discover a huge temple hidden within the cavern. From deep within the temple, they could hear strange sounds. While they gazed at the temple in curiosity, the captain spotted the remaining 2 enemies making a dash for the central part of the temple. He raised his rifle and quickly took them out. The lady soldier then noticed a new detail. There was a light coming from a hole at the back of the temple, which could be the exit. They hurried towards it, but new monsters appeared. These creatures, covered in spikes and rolling like wheels, charged at them, as if wanting to have spider babies with them. The soldiers raised their rifles and fired rapidly, occasionally tossing grenades. But the creatures fearlessly advanced, quickly taking down the last soldier. The captain and the lady soldier were lucky enough to reach the temple. The monsters seemed to fear something inside it and stopped at the entrance. With only 1 grenade left in the captain's hand and just a handgun with the lady soldier, they were at a disadvantage, especially with strange sounds still emanating from the temple. As the lady soldier searched for another way out, the captain, as if possessed, walked straight into the temple's interior. With no other choice, she quickly followed. To their shock, they found the temple was a prison for a monstrous entity, 100 meters tall with 6 eyes. When it saw the intruders, it unleashed a piercing chicken shockwave and bellowed for release. The 2 soldiers clutched their heads in agony, collapsing to the ground. It wasn't long before the captain lost his sanity, turning into a puppet of the creature, and holding the grenade, he walked towards the chain mechanism that seemed to be the monster's restraint. The lady soldier witnessed countless scenes of destruction, the very memories of the monster's previous world-annihilating wrath. Realizing that the captain might do something foolish, she struggled to her feet and rushed over, pushing him away just in time. Unexpectedly, the captain drew a dagger and charged at her heavy body. Left with no choice, the lady soldier fatally shot her comrade. As she stood over the fallen captain, rage surged within her. She drew her gun and unleashed a barrage of bullets at the monster, but to no avail. Its thick hide was unscathed. As the monster prepared to cast a spell to control her, the determined soldier gouged out her own eyes and deafened herself, resisting the deadly temptation and escaping the cursed place. This episode features the trapped Cthulhu-like entity within the temple. It continuously used sound waves to lure those with weaker mental resistance, manipulating them into freeing it. The squad's captain had been under the monster's influence since entering the cave, and despite knowing the targets were already dead, he stubbornly led the team to their demise. The 17th story, titled Jibaro, begins with a woman standing in the middle of the lake, posturing in TikTok style like a prostitute and singing melodiously. She was the legendary siren Jibaro. Beneath her enchanting facade was a body covered in pure golden scales, complemented by extravagant jewelry. Her TikTok dance could drive all men to madness. It's said that every man who had seen Jibaro never returned alive. To vanquish this demon, the church sent a righteous band of knights. Approaching the siren's lake, they scattered in search of her. Soon, a deaf knight found a golden scale in the lake and tested it with his mouth, discovering it was pure gold. The bishop immediately rallied all the knights. As they swore an oath to God and prepared to strike, Jibaro appeared to flex her sexy figure. The men were thrilled, but then Jibaro let out a series of piercing shrieks and began her soul-stealing TikTok dance. Instantly, the men covered their ears, but they quickly lost their sanity, consumed by visions of women and wealth. They turned on each other, swords swinging, and the lake ran red with greasy blood. As the slaughter continued, Jibaro retreated to deeper waters. The blindfolded knights, in their frenzy, charged into the deep and were swiftly submerged. In just minutes, the knightly host of over 100 was reduced to one bewildered deaf knight on the shore. Jibaro, noticing the survivor, targeted him with another screech and opened her hormone-smelling arms, attempting to lure him in. But he remained clueless and unresponsive. Jibaro had never encountered a man indifferent to her charms and beauty, and began to doubt her allure, quickly diving back into the water in frustration. The deaf knight, realizing the siren had vanished and his comrades were gone, mounted a stray Ferrari horse and fled for his poor life in panic. In his haste and frequent backward glances, he collided with a fallen tree and was knocked unconscious. When the deaf knight awoke again, he found his war horse gone. With no other option, he set out on foot. Trekking through the mountains in his heavy armor quickly exhausted him, so he ran to the river for a drink and collapsed under a tree, falling into a deep slumber, snoring like a pig. Unexpectedly at night, Jibaro stealthily emerges from the stream, full of curiosity, approaches the sleeping knight and appreciates his handsome face, so much so that she even wants to have a siren baby with him. She played with her body in front of him, and seeing no reaction, she pressed her face against his and slept beside him all night. The next morning, the deaf knight woke from his piggy sleep and turned to find Jibaro beside him. She instinctively ran off, but the knight reached out and grabbed her, slicing his palm on her golden scales. On closer inspection, he realized the scales were pure gold, and his gaze filled with desire. The naive Jibaro, mistaking this for true love, smiled back and ran off, with the knight in hot pursuit. Finally, Jibaro stopped in front of a rushing waterfall. The knight, wanting to cross the river, had to abandon his sword. Jibaro, now completely disarmed, twisted her waist vigorously, showing off her beauty to the knight. They embraced passionately, but without a tongue massage. Jibaro's scaled lips accidentally cut the knight's mouth, drawing blood. In a sudden change of demeanor, the knight headbutted Jibaro unconscious. Instead of robbing her body, he stripped her of her golden scales and various jewels before pushing her bloodied body over the waterfall and fleeing with a large sack of treasure. As Jibaro was swept into the lake, the water slowly turned red with blood. Then, the lake's bloody water surged downstream. The deaf knight, now burdened with extra jewels, soon became unbearably thirsty and approached the river, only to recoil in horror upon discovering the water was blood red. He collapsed on the ground and, unexpectedly, his ears heard the sound of cicadas and bird song for the first time. It turns out the knight was born deaf, which is why Jibaro's spells didn't tempt him. Her blood just happened to cure congenital disabilities. Unfortunately, the knight had just regained his hearing and couldn't adapt to this new condition. Thinking something was wrong with his head, he abandoned the jewels and stumbled to the lake's edge to clear his mind. Just then, Jibaro surfaced and saw her disfigured reflection, feeling immense pain. With her enemy in sight, she cast a spell on the knight, who could no longer resist her charm. He danced uncontrollably and ran towards the deepest part of the lake, ultimately falling into the lake of desire and losing his life like all his companions. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.